My name is Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Dispatch.
I do. You're gonna do it. Do it really well.
And I believe the world needs more dispatchers.
Around in the mud, blood, and
plus
beer.
years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July.
Say community policing, right? What about community dispatching?
So on this show, with the help of my guests, we will educate, empower, and support the heroes behind the headset.
Right.
Today's episode of the Let's Talk Dispatch podcast is a special recording with the Five Oooh Podcast. Shout out to Haley. Thanks for having us on.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Five Oooh Podcast. I'm Haley, your host, and today I'm so excited. We are here with Ashley, the raspy dispatcher. She is a 911 dispatcher, a podcast host, a dedicated dispatcher advocate and trainer, public speaker, and social media personality. Thank you so much for being here, Ashley.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
So for our listeners who don't know you, give them a quick bio about yourself, and then after we'll peel back the layers and get a little deeper. So if you want to give us a quick bio, you have the floor.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a 911 dispatcher. I think it's a classic story where I went to school for law enforcement, got my undergrad and graduate degrees in criminal justice. Thought I was going to be a cop. Spent some time doing social work after I graduated and coaching basketball. And then one day I got tired of being broke. It was like, I need to dabble into this field that I got all this education and all my degrees in. Started applying, and dispatch landed first. So that's kind of how I found myself there.
And it stuck.
It stuck. It has stuck in such a big way that I never expected it to stick. And, I think all these things that I've done and are doing for the industry is really because I had such a great training experience at my agency. So, trainers, how you treat your trainees matters,
Yeah, absolutely. In all fields. I couldn't agree more. So we're going to go over your foundation in dispatch, who you are and how you got here. I love to hear how people like grew up and how they got into these crazy fields, because we all have to be a little crazy to do these jobs, right? And then we're going to get a little deeper. So where did you grow up and how was your family foundation?
Yeah, I grew up in the Bay Area in California. For those who aren't familiar with that, it's like San Francisco, Oakland, kind of that realm, that area. I had a great upbringing. I played basketball my whole life. Super supportive family, who never they knew I didn't like the word no, so they didn't say it very often. Really supporting me in all these wild, crazy things that I would go on to do. I actually got sick when I was really young, and I think that is a big focal point in my upbringing and kind of realizing at a young age that things aren't promised. You have to kind of move at a certain pace. And yeah, I think that really shaped my life and shaped how when I knew I wanted to do something, I knew I could go do it. And I had a great family that supported all those things.
That's great. That's so good to hear. What inspired you to become a dispatcher? I know you mentioned getting a good job, a stable job, and I can say the same. Trust me, my story is not some glorious story of how I wanted to just be a lifesaver every day. So I totally get it. But what inspired you to become a dispatcher? And then tell us your background in dispatching.
Yeah, like I said, it started with just applying, right? I was applying to all of these things that were open and going for interviews. And I went and did a sit-along, which is the same as a ride-along.
I love that.
For patrol. You go and you sit with the dispatcher, you plug in, you sit back and you watch them work, and I did my sit-along with my department. And I left that experience going, wow, like this is so cool. I could totally do this. I sat along with a great dispatcher. His name was Nick. And he just had this way about him that even in crisis, tone never changed,
Right.
Was able to help folks, even callers who aren't that kind. I mean, they never phased Nick. And it was just a very humbling experience to sit with him and walk out of there going, this is something I could do. This is something I can get behind. I think I could be really good at this, you know.
Yeah. And how long have you been dispatching for?
Since August of 2018, my academy mate yelled at me the other day because I was like, oh, I think I'm at like 5.5 years, almost 6. And she was like, we're at 6. Don't don't take no months away. It was like August 10th of 2018. We started
It's literally
academy.
like your
So
anniversary right
yeah,
now.
it's literally the anniversary this week, which is so funny. I'm like, it's trauma. I put that out of my head, academy. It's
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to ask you about that too, the
Mhm.
academy.
Yeah.
But what's been your favorite part of being a dispatcher? What makes you feel like the best? When you leave work at the end of your shift, what makes you feel good?
I think, I think most people say like, oh, I help people. And like that, obviously, that's definitely why anyone gets into any first responder field, is that ability to help folks. But I think it's also my ability to adapt and seeing how, when things come in, how I can adjust and how I pivot and how I problem solve. Like that's all like, like it's cool to walk out and go, I rock that call, or like that call was wild and I was still able to, create some calm in this chaos. So helping people, of course, but it's also nice to see us perform well, the people who are doing the work.
Yeah. I like how you said like adapt because I totally like even your energy right now, it's like you can probably I feel like I'm kind of the same, like read people's energy and kind of like connect with them. Like even if you don't
Mhm.
physically see them or are physically in the same room, you can like kind of connect. You can feel their energy and like can tell like how stressed they are, what they need
Yeah.
from you, and you can kind of be like that chameleon, which is such a great quality of a dispatcher,
Mhm.
which is awesome. Um, what is the best advice you can give to someone thinking of going into a career as a dispatcher?
Well, of course, they should head to the raspydispatcher.com and check out all
Ah,
these
yes.
stars. um, but no, genuinely, do your research. I mean, this job is tough. It's not for everyone. Um, and if you get into the process and you get to a certain point, maybe you get to the sit along and you walk out and you're like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
All good. Pull out, live your best life. There's no shame in trying. It is a long process. It's a process that sometimes you got to get in it, do the thing to figure out if you're good at it or not. It's one of those things that not everyone's built for. Um, but to do your research to see if the general aspects of the job is something that interests you, something that you want to do for 12, 14 hours a day.
Right.
Um, and also, and I think maybe most importantly, do the research on the department that you're attempting to go to, because
Great point.
not all departments are built the same. Not all departments are built the same. Some are struggling and they're understaffed. Some don't have the best cultures built into their centers. And yes, there is a world where we need to get into these centers, we need to make them better, so on and so forth. But that's not for everyone. Not everyone's wanting to go in and fix a center and a new job. So do your
Right.
research, figure out what schedule they're on, figure out what the realities in that center are, and if they're going to work for you.
Do they offer sit-alongs at most departments if you are
Yes.
in this field? Okay.
Most departments offer sit-alongs, especially in the application process. If they don't, honestly, red flag. If you're not letting me sit along and to see about this job, it's such an easy thing to do for a department.
Yeah.
It's a free thing to do. Tell an applicant to come in, let them plug in, let them see the environment they're going to be working in. They might bail at that. If they bail, cool. No one wasted anyone's time or money,
Right.
you know?
No
Um,
wasted resources or time, but that's
yeah,
so
heck yeah.
that's something I didn't know that you could even
Mhm.
do. And I think that like you even pointing out the culture, it's like I don't think people realize that that's a part of every job, but
Yes.
dispatching as well is like you
Mhm.
are in a room with these people. You're not by
Mm.
yourself for 12 hours a day. You also have to have good camaraderie with your officers. Like
Mhm.
there is a connection between dispatch and officers, the huge
Mhm.
connection. And
Yeah.
then obviously your coworkers and how you're treated
Mhm.
with command staff. So that's like an awesome point that I personally didn't even even consider or think about for you guys.
Yeah. And I mean, the toxicity in dispatch is like a common thing. You go into any of these like Facebook groups that are just general private Facebook groups about dispatching, you're going to see a lot of like negative stuff. It's just, it's a reality. We have a reputation in dispatch for eating our young. I don't know if like dispatch trainers don't like time off, but like for some reason, we make it so hard sometimes for trainees to get off of training, which essentially is upping our staffing and creating us to have the ability to have time off if we're in a center that's short staffed. But historically, some dispatchers are mean and they're like, you can't do this job, or we're not supportive, and I think we're shifting from that, but they still exist and they're out there. And I talk to dispatchers all the time in my DMs who are like, my trainer hates me, they don't talk to me, like all these things. So those things matter. And I think they're worth asking direct questions about during the interview, because we all want to get the job. Like, I get that. Like, we all want to get the job, but the reality is that the first responder field has shifted so much, in the sense that back in the day, there was thousands of applicants, one job slot,
Right.
now there's thousands of job slots, 6 applicants, and only 2 of those are worth anything, so
Right.
the reality is it's a buyer's market, it's you are the prize, go into these interviews acting like it, because if that agency is hiring, the neighboring agency is hiring. So
Right.
you get your pick, you get to shop a little and own that, take that,
Yeah, no, I love that. There's definitely toxicity in the police world and my world as a police officer too. But I love that you're like, because dispatchers are a lot of the times like the unsung heroes. Like you're not seen. So sometimes it's like your voice isn't heard. And I think it's important to let these, people know who are getting into the field that they should ask these tough questions.
Yeah.
Like it's still a full-time job. It's a hard job. You got to think
Yeah.
on your feet. You got to hear, like you said, people's worst day. And the last thing you need is to be in a toxic environment. And I would say the
That part.
same if a police officer is listening, go on a ride along. Get to know the culture of the police department, same thing. So these are important things to ask. I love that. So off that topic, what struggles have you personally faced as a dispatcher?
I've lateraled from my first agency. So I was at my first agency for almost 4.5 years, and then I've been at my new agency for about a little over 2 years. And I think the hardest part that I found in my personal career so far is learning the job all over again, because every agency does this job that is essentially the same job so differently. I went from a large agency where we had a warrants channel. I never ran anybody out. All I did was trip a plate, give a status back. But then my guy left over to this other channel and once, did his thing and came back. Like, I didn't understand what they were actually doing out there because it wasn't part of my job at that agency. At my new agency, I had to learn to run, full information, full 29s on people, read warrants, read 290 hits, read, restraining order hit, like all these things, like 12 returns that come back, and you're doing it quickly, like you're getting
so
these
quickly
returns as quick as you can, common names like John Smith, you're like, you gotta wait, there's like hundreds of hits, so learning that part, and I'm still not the best at it because it's just this whole other language you're learning, but getting through relearning the job and like this imposter phenomenon, because I was a good dispatcher at my old agency. Why do I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing here? And it's simply because everyone does it differently and you're learning a new language. So I think for me, that was the toughest, like lateraling, not for the weak. I would never want to do it again. You
Girl,
know?
we are living lateral lives because I just lateral transferred to my new
Ugh,
agency,
ugh.
and I totally can relate. It's like learning a new job all over again, and you feel like I'm not a rookie, like I already know
Yeah,
my shit,
like, why are you over here
and you
telling me what
come
to
right.
do?
But when you said like when you were running names and stuff, I think people don't realize, and it's like even hearing you talk as a police officer is so funny because sometimes I'm waiting on the other line of the
Yeah,
radio and I'm like, what's taking so long? And
yeah,
it is horrible because I'm like,
yeah,
you guys aren't robots.
yeah,
Like our patience does run thin
yeah.
sometimes.
Oh,
And
1,000%.
yeah, it's so interesting to hear you say because it's so true. But like so like for our listeners, it's like if I'm doing a traffic stop as a police officer and I get someone's driver's license, I will put it on the air for my dispatcher to run through all of their criminal history or whatever they have, warrants, restraining orders, whatever. They will have to filter through that for me in what, a minute
Yeah,
maybe,
yeah,
and send it back to me with the correct information, so I'm not letting this guy go drive off if he's,
yeah,
wanted. And
yeah.
that's a huge responsibility, and
Yeah.
like I said, even talking to you, I'm realizing, like, I
Well,
know what a job you guys have, but it's so wild to, like, put
mhm.
it in speaking terms, just to sit here and
Yeah,
talk about
and for the listeners and for the other officers out there, you can even take it another step. In a smaller agency, it's just me and my partner back
right,
there. So my partner's answering phones, I'm running radio, but if the
right,
phones all blow up, it is me on radio and me on phones and my partner answering phones. So I'm doing both. You're putting out stops. I'm answering 911 while I'm trying to manage your stop. So sometimes, like recently, I've had to tell my officer they wanted us to call DOJ to check on a 290 status. And I literally was like, we'll get to it when we can. Like, because we're so
yeah,
busy in here that it's just me. I literally said on the road, it's just me and my partner. It's gonna be delayed. Like,
yeah,
we're fielding stuff. So I think that's something that officers don't think of very often, and it's no one's fault. It's just it's our two realities don't coincide, right? Like
yes,
you're sitting up there like, well, they're just answering phones or they're just at their computer, and it's like I only sent you to the one call I dropped, but I answered 60, and got rid
right,
of those calls, So
right.
just it's just a reality gap that we have between the field and dispatch.
Do you think that it would be beneficial? I think the answer is probably yes, but for officers to do sit-alongs
We
with your
have our
dispatchers.
officers do sit along. So every officer that comes into our department is required as part of their like training, even if they're a lateral, even if they're just fresh out the academy to do a sit along as part of their, and that's mostly so we could tell them like the simplest things that have nothing to do with you that you wouldn't think. So my officer's like, I want to run a name. I have to type a certain key to run someone's full last name, first name, right? But then they give me the driver's license number instead of the
Right.
name. Well, that's a
Okay.
different key. So now I have to like backpedal, like while you're going out with the thing, I have to go back and like redo, so just simple things like that. When you certain
Yes.
language you use sets me up to do something, and then you go
Got it.
opposite. And then that, so simple things like that we like to tell our officers and especially the new folks out there is just like when you say it this way, like I think you're gonna do this, and when you switch it, like, and some things we can't control, right? Like if you go to a call, you get out and you're just right into a physical with someone, like, yeah, you're not gonna put out the best radio traffic, but like routine things we train to do a certain way because of this. So it's good to have
Yeah.
those conversations, especially with the new folks.
Yeah. I think it should be more than just in training. I think like
Mhm.
maybe even yearly we should
I
sit
like that.
in like, and like even at a restaurant as a server,
Mhm.
you should have to sit back there with the cooks one day. Like you
Yeah,
should
heck
have to
yeah.
see what is the machine that is behind you serving those plates. Like we
Yeah,
all need to know what every turned wheel in this big company is
mhm,
doing to put out the best results. Like we all need to learn each other's stuff. So I
yeah,
think yeah, it's so interesting to hear because I did do like a sit along like you said in my training
mhm,
process, but that was 6 years ago. And
yeah,
it's like it's so
mhm.
easy to forget and just get wrapped up into what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, a bare minimum, just knowing your people, right? Like, just knowing
Yeah,
the people that you're literally, I talk to you every day,
every
but if you're
day.
out of uniform, I'm like, "Who is that again?" You know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, wow. I feel like I need to bring brownies or something to my dispatchers today.
they
Like,
always take the
I
snacks, you know?
yes. Um, so on that note as well,
Mm.
do you ever feel underappreciated as a dispatcher?
I think for me, historically, I've had really good luck with my departments in my career. And I know that's not the same for, I mean, I talk to people who are, overworked, underpaid, just, notches in the machine. And I know those things exist. But I've been really lucky in the sense that even if I went to Sacramento Police Department, wasn't the first department I worked at, very large department. I mean,
Yeah.
if the officer didn't work where my center was, that wasn't their beat, we never seen them. Like we knew our officers by their cadence and by their identifiers. Like 2 Alpha 6, that guy annoys me. He takes forever to go to a call. Like you
Yeah.
don't know their name though, but they're
Yeah.
their mannerisms, the way they work, that's how we knew them. With this department, it's smaller. And I know these guys. I know about their lives, I know about their families, know about their kids, all that stuff. So there is a different aspect of it, and something else to consider when you're going through the process, what kind of relationship you want
Totally.
with officers and with the department. Um, but overall, I've had really supportive mentors, really supportive trainers. When I started doing, Raspy Dispatcher was brought to life at Sacramento Police Department. Everyone was like on board for me doing this thing. And it's really grown from what it really started as to what it is now.
Yeah.
So I've been really, really lucky, but I do want to acknowledge that I know that's not the reality for so many departments and so many places.
Like you said, recognizing people in person. And I'm a problem in this area as well. It's like when I go up to my dispatch, it's typically only when I need something from them.
Mhm, mhm.
And I feel like I can make it a point to just go say hello because
Yeah.
we are a team.
Yeah, and you know what? They
Yeah.
don't let us out of our box, so come see us
Right.
because
We
we
gotta
can't
come
come
see
see
you.
you. Half the time, there isn't even a window in there, so, like
Yeah, ours has like a little window, like a drive-through window.
yeah.
And yeah, it's important. I definitely will and I think about it on shift here
Mhm.
and there. I'm like, I gotta go say hi
Yeah.
today and I sometimes it gets busy and I
Mhm.
forget, but some of the dispatchers I work with have quite literally, like saved my life or my partner's lives. And it's like so important to acknowledge like what you guys do for us. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna get better at that. Uh, so you mentioned your podcast. So tell
Mhm.
us about how you decided to make your podcast, The Raspy Dispatcher.
Yeah, so the Raspy Dispatcher, the Let's Talk Dispatch podcast, it is really a spinoff per se of my YouTube channel, The Raspy Dispatcher, which is where it all kind of started. There's a lot of informational videos on there for pre-employment stuff, aspiring dispatcher stuff, practice test stuff. At a point, I was like, well, I've done all this, one-on-one by myself. Like, I want to start branching out and talking to people that have more knowledge and more experience and just more worldview on this niche group than I
Yeah.
do. So I started tricking my friends that I met on the conference circuit into coming on to a show with me. And we were just recording it really just for YouTube at first. And then one of my friends was like, well, why don't you just put out the podcast? You have the audio, you're doing the thing already. Like, just push it out in audio format too. I was like, okay, I can do that. So it's grown into the podcast. It's just grown into um, this information hub that just kind of welcomes everybody,
Yeah.
current dispatchers, former dispatchers, um, companies, nonprofits and for-profit companies that work for first responders, or who have a really special niche for first responders can come on, share their resources. And it's I've talked to a 3-week dispatcher who did it for 3 weeks, had a toxic environment, hated it, and left. And they wanted
Mhm.
to come on and talk about it. And I'm like, I'm here for it. Not
Yeah.
we're not here to just tell people like, this is a wonderful job, come save life. Like, that's just not the reality. We
Right.
have so much work to do. We are trying to make this industry better. We're trying to be better 911 dispatchers, 911 call takers. We have a lot of work to do, and learning from each other and each other's experiences, good and bad, makes us have a better opportunity to learn and be better. So that's kind of what Let's Talk Dispatch has become. We have a private Facebook group as well that welcomes
I
aspiring
love that. That's
dispatchers.
great.
Yeah, and it's so opposite of those other Facebook groups I talked about earlier. Like, it's all positive. Like, if you want to go in there and post like, I'm having a trouble with my radio here, which is just being able to hear the officers, and like, you can ask these
Yeah, like an
questions
open
that,
forum of questions.
yeah,
That's
it's
so
open
great.
forum. Baby trainee dispatchers, aspiring dispatchers, if they have questions about their background, like, they just ask, and it's always a positive place. Like, it's so fun. It's growing to like, we're at almost 1,000 people in there, and it's just an
Wow.
information hub. So it's an awesome place as well. That's
What is
growing.
that Facebook group called?
It's called Let's Talk Dispatch. So just like the
Awesome.
podcast, it's Let's Talk Dispatch. And it's just another information hub for anyone and everyone, current, aspiring, and former dispatchers, to come and
That's so
just
great.
pour into each other,
I love that. I feel like there needs to be more like groups like that for people to like just ask questions, because like there's so
Yeah.
many times where you're afraid to ask questions to like your superiors because
Mhm.
you don't want to like feel stupid or whatever. It's so
Yeah.
easy to just like post a question there and have a nice community to help you
Yeah.
out.
And people ask me questions all the time, and sometimes it's out of my scope of practice. Sometimes I just don't have the knowledge for it. And so I created that space to be able to cast a wider net. Like, I
Yeah.
had someone message me a question. I was like, I'm gonna throw this in my Facebook group because they don't have Facebook. And I was like, I'll screenshot the answers and send it back to you. And so I got like 50 answers from it and send it back to them. Like, there you go. Like, there's
Yeah.
so many places, so many people, so many experiences. It's
I
awesome. It's
love
awesome.
that. That's great. Like everything that you're doing is
Mhm.
so great. And like you said, it's like a niche or market, but
Mhm.
at the end of the day, it's in every single police department across
Every
the
single.
United States.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's just
Yeah.
it needs to be talked about more, and there needs to be more
Mhm.
people like you who are open and helping people, because we need you guys more more than anything, you know? So okay. This may be a tough question, but have you ever had an officer in serious danger? And I'm sure you have, on the other end of the radio, and how did you handle that situation?
Yeah, I at my first agency, we were, high crime, high priority. I mean, if you weren't working a shooting on your shift, you weren't at work. So it was just
Yeah,
one of those, it was a heck of an agency to learn at. I've had multiple officers involved in shootings and multiple officers being shot at. We've had an officer while I was at that department, be killed in the line of duty, from a domestic violence call. So we
were you
definitely,
working that night that that
I was
officer got
coming,
shot?
I wasn't on duty when the incident started, but I came into shift and the incident lasted all through the night.
Yeah,
Lasted probably like 6 hours or something like that before
yeah,
we were able to get to the individual. Um, but yeah, it's tough. I mean, even like, I did a podcast episode about them, Officer Tara Sullivan. Um, and I never knew this officer, because again, big agency, we don't get to see all of our officers if they're not working in our beat where our center was. And
right.
even still, the impact, the loss, hearing their end of watch go out, in my ear on, not on social media the next day, like actually watching my person write it out and dispatching
Yeah,
give it out. And it's definitely it's a reality check, for I think everyone. Um,
yeah,
but especially dispatch, it definitely impacts us.
yeah. Like commanding the air, and like
Mm.
you basically turn into a supervisor like in those
Yeah.
moments, because you
Mhm.
have to delegate what's important on the air. You have to tell people to basically shut up, and you
Yeah.
need to tell like it is yeah, I mean, obviously I've experienced it on my end, and what I feel like people don't talk about enough is like being a dispatcher, you have to be ready for shit, really shit to hit the fan, and you need to be
Yeah.
prepared to take control of that air.
Mm.
And do whatever you can to make sure everyone gets in the right place, sets up those perimeters. You're making sure that they have the right they're if someone's shot, you gotta make sure that they're driving to the right hospital, make sure it's a trauma
Mhm.
hospital, like, all of that stuff, and, like, you're blocking off the roads. You're doing so much behind the
Mhm.
scenes, and it's like,
Mhm.
people need to realize that, like, what you guys do behind the scenes is, like, literally saving our lives.
Yeah. And mind you, and I think it's another thing that people don't think about, and I didn't think about it until I lateraled, is like if a major incident, let's say, forbid a school shooting happens, and
Correct.
it's just me and my partner, and
Right?
there's thousands of students calling in,
Right.
and
Wow.
me and my partner are fielding thousands of calls. And then I'm on radio and answering phones, trying to get, everyone set up where they need to be set up, trying to get medical staging, trying to get
Right.
helicopters involved. I mean, all these things are being done by two people, which is why
Wow.
it's so important for us to educate citizens about calling 911. If you are calling
Totally.
911 to request information, you are blocking a line from me talking to a student who's involved in the scenario that we're talking about, a school shooting. So if you're just calling to ask me if we're aware that there's a school shooting, like, and you have no info, you're blocking a line. And then I have to
Totally.
take time to get you off the line and then pick up a phone with someone who's actually got some info for me. So though I understand parents are scared and people want to know stuff, but we're doing a job that is, high intense. We're trying to get through people. Like, there's so many people calling, and some of these centers have one, two if
Yeah.
they're lucky, dealing with that thing. So
Yeah.
it's just an education thing, right? Like, if you don't have info and you're not needing info, meaning you're not in it, like, don't call us on 911
Right.
because we're
Right.
busy.
No, that's so important, like 911 education, like,
Mhm.
um, people don't call 911 for the right reasons all the time. And
Mhm.
like you said, that could be really taking away from an officer who's in trouble or like a serious situation. So if you're
Mhm.
listening, make sure you're calling 911 for like a valid a very
Please,
valid
life or
reason.
death emergencies. Every agency has a non-emergency number, and I
Yes.
mean, and if you call 911 and you say it's not an emergency, that does not change the fact that you called 911. Like, telling me it's not an emergency does not mean we're not on the 911 line.
Right.
It's super frustrating, but I get it. We
Uh,
panic, we dial these numbers, we know someone will answer, and it's just like, if you can tell me this is not emergency, then you have the time to look up a number and or should already have that number in your phone because you're listening to the Five Oooh Podcast right now, and you're stopping and finding the non-emergency number and plugging it
yes.
in.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's such a good point. 911 knowledge. Definitely. Where do you see your career going from here? You already have so much on your plate. You're already doing so many great things. What's your plans for the future?
I'm just taking it day by day, kind of letting it go where it's gonna go. I think I would love to be in some type of supervisory directory role in a center
Totally
and
can see
kind of
that for you.
make these things that I believe go top down and, create this cultured environment that I believe all of our centers should have. Um, but yeah, I mean, as far as the Recipe Dispatcher, I'm starting to do a lot more speaking. I'm starting to create more education around, kind of just generic topics that we need to talk more about, updating our hiring process, utilizing dispatch on our social media teams, just kind of things that I think are not rocket science, but we just don't talk about because as a whole, law enforcement, first responder, we're slow to change.
Yes, we are.
And we hate change. And
Yes.
so sometimes, the response often, especially in dispatch, is like, well, we've been doing it this way for forever. And I don't know about anybody else, but I don't want to dispatch barefoot and going uphill in the snow just because my trainer did. Like, if
Yeah.
I can do this, I can do this with less trauma, with a less load, with,
Yes.
I'm cool with that. And I'm cool
Yeah.
with the person coming behind me having less to deal with because we've improved things. I think too often we're stuck in this wheel of, I didn't have it easy, and why should they,
Yes.
it's like, because you
Yeah.
should have had it easy. I'm sorry that happened to you, but like, let's not pass on trauma.
Right.
down through our department for 100 years, you know. We
Right.
have a lot of work to do, and I think easy things can be done to make things better, and sometimes we fight against that. So
Well, naturally, you're speaking all day. You know how to speak on your feet. Like you definitely have that presence where you can be a speaker, a supervisor. So those are all great things that I think you'd be so great at. Um, what inspires you to do this? Like you could just go to work and do your job. But is it like you said, like changing that culture? Is that like your main thing? Or is it just like in your nature to just want to just help in all aspects of
I
life?
definitely think it's in my nature to just not know when to quit. I have 2 master's
Oh
degrees.
God, same.
I'm always just trying to do the most. So that's definitely in my nature, and I'm trying to learn to do less. Um,
Same
but
girl. I wish.
but I think for this specifically, it actually comes from being feeling a little disrespected after I completed, you know, this academy training. And you know, I got, like I said, I got my master's in undergrad in administration of justice, went through 6 years of higher education for law enforcement. I get into a law enforcement department as a dispatcher, go through academy, which was rough. I mean, it was 7 weeks of just, am I going to get fired this week because I don't pass this test? Like, oh, we're still hired. Like, it's great. You know, and then I survived training, which is training probation is about 18 months. And I do all this and I get to the end of it and I look back and I'm like, wow, 6 years of higher education on law enforcement, and we never talked about dispatch. Like,
You know what? That is wild.
we never talk about dispatch. We go to school for criminal justice, and they train you to be a cop, like, period. They're
Wow.
educating for patrol, which we need officers, totally valid. But not everyone
Yeah.
who leaves school from criminal justice, if they even get a full degree, because you only need like 26 credits,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
You might get into the field, might hate it. You might get into the field, blow a knee. You know, like, there's so many things that could happen um, in trying to pursue a career in law enforcement, that we should talk about the other options you have available. And there's
You
so
are
many
like
more.
hitting the nail on the head. That is so
Yeah,
crazy.
there's so many other options. And it's not that dispatch is the fallback, or the my plan didn't work out and now I'm here. It's just, it's another viable option. You know, like, you could
Totally.
very well get into the field and not want to touch, smell, or see, you know, anything. You're like, oh,
Yes.
this, I didn't think this would bother me, you know, but now I have someone's poop on my hand and I don't like that. You know,
Yeah.
like, I was out here on a perimeter for 7 hours and I would really just like the option to pee. You know, like,
Literally.
these are just things like people don't want to spend the day doing. And so dispatch is another option to be able to directly help people to be involved in first responder, whether it's law enforcement or the fire department, and still have my heater
Totally.
on all day. You know, like, these are,
Yes.
and so I was just like annoyed
No,
that,
that's so true. Like I didn't
yeah.
think about that either. I have my master's in public safety administration, and we never talked about dispatch.
And I was one of those people who, I kept my book. So I was real petty and I went to like the index and was like,
Like
communications, nothing. Dispatch, nothing. Like, what? It's nowhere in here.
it's
So
so
it's not even
wild.
a footnote, you know, and that's not okay.
It's not okay. We
Mhm.
literally can't run without you. Like
Yeah.
what would we do? Like,
Yeah. Like, think
oh
of
my
any
God.
time you guys have MDT issues or radio issues, or like, you know, like, we're fixing it, in the sense that we're
Oh
calling the
my
people, we're making
God.
it stuff where, you know, like, if the radios go down, like, we're activated, we're pulling out backup lines, we're pulling out phones, you know, we're dispatching, you know, the pivot is wild in dispatch when it
Yes.
comes to technology crashing. But
100%.
yeah, we just need
Wow.
to talk about dispatch more as a career, not a backup plan, but a career, and an
100%.
option for folks who are interested in this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that is so
Mhm,
great. Like, um, wow. Because I know, a ton of dispatchers and
mhm,
they love it. And this is the career that they wanted to go into in the first
mhm,
place. And like you
mhm.
said, there's a girl I know, she's a dispatcher, and she's like, I wanted to be a dispatcher because I'm nosy as fuck. And I just wanted to hear the drama, but I didn't want to be in it. I just
Yeah.
wanted to hear,
I don't
and I'm like, you know what?
want to smell it, but I want to, I want to be, I just want
Yeah.
to keep it from
Like,
distance.
I love that, but you are part of law enforcement. You are
Mhm.
saving lives. You are
Yeah.
shutting shit down. Like, we
Yeah.
need you.
I mean, and
That is
especially
so
like
wild.
think about it, the dispatchers who, are doing medical, they're delivering babies like before first responders even get there.
100%.
Yeah, like they're
You're
they're
telling
getting
me what to do. You're telling people on the radio how to administer CPR,
yeah,
deliver a baby.
you're getting a 6-year-old to do CPR on their grandpa. I mean, like, applaud to
Oh
the
my
medical
gosh.
dispatchers out there. You folks are like superhuman. I'm just like,
Yes.
where'd the shooter go? But folks who are like getting someone to perform life-saving, hands-on medical stuff before anyone even gets there, like those folks are, applause to them. They are
Yes.
doing the dispatch on 1,000% because it's just and people like you call 911, fire department comes, but like there's hopefully 10-minute or less response time that something is happening that whole time that those people are driving there. And it's the dispatcher
Yes.
providing direction, whether it's how to be safe or
Yep.
whether it's how to administer CPR, how to, um, yeah. So
Like, and you provide vital information, like on the way there. You could
yeah.
be gathering information, obviously, that we
Mhm.
are unaware about. Like on the way to a call, it could be a simple, well, it's never simple, a domestic, right?
Yeah.
We're on the way, and then you could let me know, just for information, we just found out that there's a gun in the home.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
husband, for instance, does own a weapon just
Mhm.
for officer safety. Like those little things, those
Mhm.
pieces of knowledge that we get on the way to a call comes from our dispatch. And it's so
Mhm.
important. The way we approach certain situations is
Yeah.
because of the additional information that you guys are getting from the other line, asking those important questions to ensure that your officers are safe.
Yeah, especially if they're seen with like what pocket did they put the gun in? Like even something simple and specific
Yeah.
as that. Like they're saying he's putting it in his back left pocket. Like so my officers know, like, all right, I'm looking that way, and
Yep.
that's where it
Yep.
is. That's where we're gonna find it. That's where we need to be aware of, things like that.
Yeah. Amazing. I, I feel like a horrible, I need to go hug all my dispatchers after this. Um, well, any final takeaways for our listeners? Anyone who's listening here, and then let us know where we can find you, listen to your podcast, find you on Instagram, find your Facebook page. You're like me, we're doing too much, but I love it.
Yeah, it's
So,
facts.
what are your final takeaways for us, and then where can we find you?
My final takeaways are, yeah, if you don't have at least a weekly, check in with your dispatch as patrol or as fire department, try to do your best to just get some FaceTime up there. We care about you folks. We do have a very high stake in wanting you to go home safe. I promise that we don't try to be rude or load you with paper, or we really do try to keep things very even. But most of the time, like we just want to do our jobs well. We understand that you guys have realities that we have no idea about, and the same goes, for us. We have realities that sometimes our patrol folks don't fully understand either. So, communication, understanding, and connection bridges those gaps to where, if I thought you had an attitude and I know you, I'm like, oh, they're probably just dealing with something. I'm gonna
Yeah.
lean towards the other than lean towards being upset about it when it really wasn't that deep.
Yeah.
For the aspiring folks out there, whether it's dispatch or patrol or any first responder field, is do your research. You are the prize. What do you want your life to look like for the next 10, 15, maybe more years? Do you want to work graveyard? Do you want to work eights? Do you want to work tens? All those things are super
Totally.
important to figure out what works for you. I have a dispatcher in my center now who loves tens, and I'm like, I could never go back to tens. That sounds terrible. So do your research, figure out what's a good fit for you. And if you are considering the dispatch side of things, we have lots of resources at theraspydispatcher.com. On all the social medias, it's all the Raspy Dispatcher. And the podcast itself is Let's Talk Dispatch Podcast.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Like, you've literally opened my mind. I already had an immense respect for dispatchers because of true lived experiences that I've had.
Yeah.
And I have even more now, and I totally think that you are making changes, and I'm like really impressed by you, and I think that it's awesome what you're doing. And I hope that not only people who are inspired by this become dispatchers, but I hope that first responders who are listening to this, like, truly, like, get that FaceTime, like you said. And I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna probably go get some like cookies or something and bring them to my dispatchers today. Because yeah, you guys are you're in that room, and you're like truly the unsung heroes that don't get enough FaceTime and don't get enough recognition for doing all that you do. So thank you so much for being here. I can't wait for people to hear this one. But yeah, go follow her online, join her Facebook group. I'm sure you will answer DMs if people have it.
For sure.
You're super kind and gracious. So thank you so much, Ashley, and be safe. And thank you for all that you do. We appreciate you more than you know.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. It was wonderful. And thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Dispatch Podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the show, or maybe even submitting your own story, you can do all that and more at theraspydispatcher.com. Until next time, stay raspy.